Hello, this is Mr. Janosiak coming to you from my home. Today, our topic is patterns of minority group treatments, and there are 7 of them. Official policies toward minority groups within a society vary widely. The most common patterns of minority treatment include cultural pluralism, assimilation, legal protection, segregation, subjugation, population transfer, and extermination. We're starting with cultural pluralism. One response to ethnic and racial diversity is cultural pluralism. This policy allows each group within a society to keep its unique cultural identity. Switzerland provides an example of cultural pluralism in action. Switzerland has 3 official languages: French, German, and Italian, one language for each of its 3 major ethnic groups. These groups live together peacefully and are extremely loyal to Switzerland. Furthermore, none of the groups has taken on a dominant or minority role in Swiss society. And hey, look, it's a picture of me in Switzerland. Be jealous. And yes, look, it's my mother and my sister, who are both substantially shorter than I am. The second one is assimilation. In many societies, racial and ethnic minorities attempt to hold on to some of their unique cultural features. However, official policies do not always favor such efforts. For example, at one time in the United States, it was hoped that the various groups that make up American society could be blended into a single people with a common homogeneous culture. This hope formed the basis of the image of the United States as a melting pot. The blending of culturally distinct groups into a single group with a common culture and identity is called assimilation. In most societies, some assimilation occurs voluntarily. Over time, different groups within a society exchange many cultural traits as a result of daily interaction and intermarriage. When I think of this, like my first thought that comes to mind is we had Easter most recently, and you have this example where even though it is perhaps a Christian holiday, many people practice some sort of Easter celebration in the United States. That is one example. On the other hand, attempts to force assimilation often lead to conflict. For example, in the 1980s, the Bulgarian government waged a long campaign to forcibly assimilate the country's large Turkish minority. This campaign involved forbidding the Turks from practicing their religion, from using their language, and from celebrating their culture. Thousands of Turks were reportedly killed or tortured in conflicts over these assimilation policies. The third is legal protection. Many countries have taken legal steps to ensure that the rights of minority groups are protected. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 are examples of such legislation in the United States. The United Kingdom adopted similar legislation in 1965 with the passage of the Race Relations Act. Affirmative action programs in the United States are another example of legal efforts to achieve equal rights. These programs are designed to correct past imbalances in educational and employment opportunities available to minority groups. Affirmative action programs generally give preference to racial and ethnic minorities and women for jobs and school admission. In recent years, criticism has grown over affirmative action policies. Critics charge that they are a form of reverse discrimination. Recent legal challenges have been made against affirmative action, and government institutions have been reconsidering their policies. The fourth pattern is segregation. Policies that physically separate a minority group from the dominant group are referred to as segregation. Under segregation, the minority group is forbidden to live in the same areas as the dominant group and cannot use the same public facilities. Sociologists recognize 2 types of segregation. De jure segregation is based on laws. Segregation based on informal norms is called de facto segregation. History provides many examples of segregation. For example, during the Middle Ages, European Jews were forced to live in walled-off communities called ghettos. Segregation was practiced legally in the United States until the 1960s. As a result of earlier segregation policies, many American minority groups are still concentrated in specific areas of cities. The fifth is subjugation. Some countries maintain control over groups through force. This practice is called subjugation. The most extreme form of subjugation is slavery, the ownership of one person by another. Examples of slavery can be found throughout history. South Africa's system of apartheid is a recent example of subjugation. Apartheid, which literally means apartness, called for the legal segregation of all groups within the country. Political and economic power rested with the smaller white population and was rigidly maintained through force. International opposition eventually brought about the dismantling of the system in the mid 1990s. One kind of facet of subjugation is when you use the police in a way that is with force to subjugate a population, right? When the police are a tool of the dominant group to subjugate the minority group, you get that subjugation. Sixth is population transfer. Sometimes the dominant group in a society separates itself from a minority group by transferring the minority population to a new territory. This policy can be carried out indirectly or directly. With indirect transfer, the dominant group makes life for minorities so miserable that they simply leave. By contrast, direct transfer involves using force to move people to new locations, sometimes within the same country. Two examples of direct transfer from U.S. history are the resettlement of Native Americans on reservations during the 1800s and the placement of nearly 120,000 Japanese Americans in internment camps during World War II. Direct population transfers may also involve expelling a group from a nation. For example, in the 1750s, the British authorities in Canada expelled the Acadians, a French-speaking minority from Nova Scotia. A more recent example is the forceful removal of the Asian population from Uganda in 1972. The final one, and the most extreme, is extermination. The most extreme pattern of intergroup relations is the extermination or elimination of a minority group. When the goal of extermination is the destruction, in whole or in part, of a national, racial, ethnic, or religious group, it is referred to as genocide. The phrase, in whole or in part, is significant. Perpetrators of genocide need not intend to destroy an entire group. The intent to destroy a substantial segment of a group, such as all of the group members that live in a particular region, still qualifies as genocide. The 20th century's most notorious case of genocide occurred in Europe. Soon after gaining power over Germany in 1933, Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Party began to persecute German Jews. During World War II, German conquest brought nearly all of Europe's 9 million Jews under Nazi control. In the largest genocide in world history, the Nazis attempted to exterminate the entire Jewish population of Europe. This atrocity became known as the Holocaust. In all, Hitler's Nazi forces murdered some 6 million Jews. The Nazis also murdered as many as 5 million other people from groups they viewed as inferior and undesirable, such as Slavs, Roma, Jehovah's Witnesses, communists, and people with mental or physical disabilities. And for my personal sake here, I'll also mention, of course, the Poles. Holocaust hits a little home for us people with Polish ancestry. Another notorious 20th century genocide occurred in the African nation of Rwanda. In 1994, long simmering tensions between Tutsi and Hutu ethnic groups erupted in violence. In just 3 months, the Hutus killed more than 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus. Some 2 million people became refugees and fled Rwanda, where food shortages and diseases killed thousands, despite international humanitarian aid. In the 1990s, some dominant groups combined population transfer and extermination in a practice called ethnic cleansing. This practice involves removing a group from a particular area through terror, expulsion, and mass murder. For example, in 1998, the government of the European nation of Serbia began a campaign to drive out or kill about 1.7 million ethnic Albanians in the province of Kosovo. Within a year, more than 1.5 million ethnic Albanians have been expelled from their homes. As many as 10,000 have been killed. Only armed intervention by North Atlantic Treaty Organization forces prevented Serbian forces from achieving their goal. Unfortunately, genocide is not a thing of the past. In July 2007, the International Criminal Court charged Sudanese President Omar Hassan al-Bashir with carrying out genocide against African peoples living in the Darfur region of Western Sudan. Despite the efforts of an African Union peacekeeping force, the brutal campaign killed an estimated 400,000 people and forced another 2.5 million to flee from their homes. I would also here mention one current one that you may see in the news, an example of ethnic cleansing, are I'm going to butcher this, Uyghurs in China. They are a Muslim minority population, about 1% of the population of China. and they are today being forced into concentration camps, and they are persecuted by the Chinese government, who demand that they give up their Islamic beliefs and show loyalty to the Communist Party. That is happening right now, this very moment.